So here we are, well, not the perfect time, but you gotta said a time, that's for sure. Today we're looking at Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, released for the Xbox 360 in 2008, and I'm looking at the rare replay version on Xbox One. Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is easily the most controversial Banjo game, and it's just considered one of the generally most disappointing games probably ever, and certainly on the 360. But 11 years later, yes, 11 years later, I can't believe it's been that long. Does the game, is it better now than it was when it came out? Is the sting just as bad as it was then? Let's take a nice critical look at the game.
So when it comes to the history on Nuts and Bolts, I'm not going to explain it all. I'm sure everyone watching knows the history. After two fantastic 3D platformers, we had two mixed GBA games, then Microsoft announced there would be a new game. This new game looked promising, then when it got shown off that they used cars, people were understandably upset. But let's just look at the game. So Nuts and Bolts takes place 8 years after Tooie. The duo is hella fat now, and they're just eating pizza. Well, they're chilling, and Grunty, now just ahead, shows up. The three are about to fight when they're paused by Lord of Games, or Log. Well, he decides after pissing the fanbase off that we need a new gameplay style. He makes Banjo and Kazooie skinny again, and gives Grunty a body. In addition, he decides they will fight in vehicles now. Grunty gets a car, and the duo gets a trolley. They are then teleported to a new world known as Showdown Town. Well, Grunty and Banjo with Kazooie will complete various tasks, and the winner will get the deed to Spiral Mountain. The loser will be forced to make games for Log, and so it's on. The story, well, I dislike the story and premise for a number of reasons. Besides the obvious fact that the game makes fun of what made Banjo and Kazooie great to begin with, I'm just not a fan of the premise. I don't like Log. I don't like this idea that they have to have a new gameplay style. I don't like how the stakes are so low, it seems, and I certainly don't like the world the game is in. I also don't like how the game really doesn't progress past that initial cutscene. I think Log is a crummy new character with a bunch of bad video game references and isn't even given enough time properly to develop as a character. I know this is a Banjo game, but this is apparently a main character, and I'll be honest, there's little to no development or personality to Log. Was not a fan of him at all or his bad jokes. His explanation as to why we need a new gameplay style, really quite bad as well. He basically disappears after the initial cutscene until like the end of the game. He may say like one or two things, but that's about it. In fact, I could say that about the entire story. It literally just completely disappears after that initial cutscene. Like it doesn't even get mentioned that there is stakes at all or that they have to defeat Grunty. Like Grunty is literally just chilling in the main world and you can just run into her. Like it just seems like there's no stakes at all. No sense of urgency, nothing. And while the original Banjo games did have that kind of plot, to some extent, that disappeared for a bit, I mean, it was nothing this bad, and those are N64 games, man. This is a 360 game. It really wasn't this bad. For instance, in the first game, Grunty would constantly talk to you and make fun of you, and in Banjo-Tooie you were given tons of cutscenes and reminders that everything was at stake. Here, though, there's nothing. There's no indication, there's no characters that give a crap about anything, including Banjo, Kazooie, and Grunty. There's just nothing. There's literally no sense of urgency or any like notion that anything matters. I mean, maybe if like Log would remind you more often that you're supposed to be battling Grunty, that would help, but no, that's not it. That's not it. And yeah, you do battle Grunty a number of times, but these don't feel like battles. They feel like normal missions with no meaning at all. It just sucks and really failed to captivate me as a whole. So while the plot doesn't really progress and Log sucks, what about the other characters in the game? Surely there's more to that. The only other new character that I can think of is TT, and he's just an asshole. He's literally there to just be the best and has no character development at all. Okay, well maybe I'm looking in like the wrong area. I'm looking at the new characters. What about the old characters, some of the classics? Well, the old characters have been stripped down from what they were in the previous games, and they're honestly shells of their former selves. They lack personality, good character traits, charm, and are generally uninteresting. They really don't add anything to the game, which is a major shame because the characters were great in the previous two games. Grunty isn't even very good. While she did go back to rhyming, she does little to get in the way of Banjo and adds basically nothing to the story at all. It's just about her fighting the duo. I think all the characters in the game are just shells of their former selves, minus Banjo and Kazooie. They aren't terrible. Nowhere near as good as the previous games, but they don't really add much either. But they're the exception rather than the norm. The world of Nuts and Bolts is just as bad as well. Its lack of charm, it's uninteresting, and it had me yawning more than anything else. I don't like Showdown Town. I don't like these other worlds that show up. I much would have rather seen the Isle of Hags and maybe some other returning areas, not these uninspired new ones. There's only 2 worlds I like in this game, and I'll get back to them later. And spoilers, one of them is Spiral Mountain. I think all the world just lacks creativity, kind of on a just entire level, and they're not anywhere near as interesting as the old games. And part of that is the characters. Really, it's a mix of things, if you couldn't tell. The boring characters, the uninspired, drab, sleep-inducing worlds, combined with a basically non-existent plot outside of the first and last cutscene, and you have a recipe for a mundane, tiring premise. It's not good. I just don't think it has, like, any positives at all to it, for the reasons I mentioned, and I think it's a huge step back from the previous games. The ending is terrible as well, as you get the deed to Spiral Mountain, and Grunty has to go make games for Log. It's just not good, and it honestly feels really out of place for a Banjo game. The entire premise just doesn't feel like a Banjo game story, and I'm not saying it has to feel exactly like a Banjo story. I mean, of course it can feel a little different, but it could be different and good, and this game just isn't. Like, on its own, it's just not even very good as well. And then if you want to compare it to the other Banjo Kazooies, it just falls apart, in my opinion. But I'm done bitching about the story. Well, let's just talk about that gameplay for Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. So, you obviously play as Banjo and Kazooie. So you get in the car.
Queen.
Nearly 12 years later, and I'm still just deeply affected and unhappy about this. But for the sake of this video, let's just try to get through the game. Let's just try to get through it. Let's do this.
So yes, you get the vehicle. See, Banjo and Kazooie can't really do anything from their previous games. They didn't lose all their moves, but they lost almost all of them. So Banjo can run around, he can jump once, and he can climb poles. He can also walk across tight ropes and hang on ledges. So at least he kept the grip grab, at least. I mean, that's something. You can also attack with a wrench spin. It's a very basic attack. You can use it in the air and in the water as well. Yeah, you can swim, and it's very slow, and it's actually worse than it even was before. You can also grab stuff with this wrench. You can lift stuff up and place it somewhere else, like on your trolley or vehicle that can carry stuff, or if you just need to move something, but that's it. So yeah, they can't really do that much. They can't do very much at all, actually. It's very basic. They can't even do as much as they could do in Banjo 1 without any moves learned. No, it focuses on the vehicles, so you press Y on the Xbox controller and then you get into the vehicle. There are a variety of vehicles to get into the game. Besides the trolley and whatever you make, there's other types of vehicles. There's cars in a variety of types, there's boats, there's helicopters, planes. There are even a few more types of vehicles, but those are the main types. A huge part of the game centers around vehicle construction. While I mentioned some of the vehicles present a large part of the game, in fact, not just the vehicles, but making vehicles is also a large part of the game. You can completely customize a vehicle starting from scratch, making a body, adding wheels, balloons, wings, floaters, weapons, ammo, fuel, engines, etc. There is a lot, and I mean a lot of customization. If I could praise the game for one thing, it would definitely be that customization. It is quite good. The tools that are there are actually really quite good, and you can pretty much make whatever you want. If you want to make a cool looking car, you can. If you want to make something look hella stupid, you can do that too. If you want to make a giant shark with guns like me, that's more than plausible as well. Make whatever the hell you want, and I guarantee you will get results. There's a few things to consider like weight, speed, etc., but these are just factors to consider when making your magnum opus. There are even some pre-made vehicles here as well, if you feel a bit uncreative and drab like our government. But I'll be honest, you can make much better vehicles than these. Okay, so clearly the game revolves around vehicles, whether it's making your own, using one of the pre-made ones, but what will you be doing? So let's go into the structure of the game. So you're in Showdown Town, the main hub of the game. There is 5 worlds in the game, plus Showdown Town. Your main collectible is Jiggies again, but it's a little different when it comes to getting them all in this game. You don't find them at all anymore, actually. You can't find them anywhere. Now, no. What you gotta do is you gotta go into one of these 5 worlds. Each one has 6 acts. See, each world has these 6 acts, and these acts unlock as you get more and more jiggies. In each act, there are a number of jiggies to get, but you get them all the same. Basically, in every world, you go and find a character to give you a mission. Each mission is something different, whether it's a race, moving objects in some capacity, or defeating some enemies. Really, all the missions fall under those 3. For each mission, you are timed in some way. If you complete the objective and complete it fast enough, you get a jiggy. You complete it really fast, you get a TT trophy. Basically, if you collect a couple TT trophies, you get a jiggy as a reward. So you want to aim for the trophies, as you'll get more jiggies that way. However, if you are not quick enough, but don't fail the mission, you will get notes. But if you don't even do that well, you fail. The better you do in the mission, the more rewards you get, so really just aim for the trophy. After you complete the missions and complete them well enough to earn jiggies, you don't get them immediately. No, once you get back to the hub in Showdown Town, you then get them from a jiggy dispenser, take them to the center of town where it sucks them up, and then it adds it to your total. At first I kind of liked this, as it was fun to take them all back and see them all individually get sucked up. It does get quite annoying quickly, and I wish you could just add it to your total normally. Like, why does this even have to be here? So besides the jiggies, what else is there to collect? Well, I mentioned the trophies, but in the end, those just get you more jiggies. But there is notes and car parts. Throughout the game, in fact, all the worlds in the game, there are notes placed around, like the old games. Their places are pretty much all over the place and borderline random in some aspects, but there's tons to get. Notes in the game are used as currency. You can buy new car parts or car designs from Humba in the hub with these notes. In addition, all over the hub there are boxes with numbers on them. You find these and take them to Mumbo, and he will give you car parts for each one. You're going to want these car parts, as I feel a lot of them are actually really useful, especially near the end of the game. Something I have not mentioned yet is that in Showdown Town you can only use the trolley. In all the other worlds you can use whatever vehicle you want, but in the main hub you can only use the trolley. At first you can't do like anything with it, but after you beat Grunty in one of the 5 worlds, you get a new addition for it, in addition to a jiggy. Like, you get the ability to jump, shoot a laser, go on water, etc. But if you couldn't tell, the core gameplay loop really is to go into these worlds, one of the 6 acts, complete these missions to get enough jiggies to unlock the next act, to unlock the next world, to do the same thing over and over. You do this 5 times and then you're able to go to the final area, Spiral Mountain. In addition, you occasionally explore the hub for notes and car parts. You even do some minor platforming and on-foot exploration, but this is very limited, I will say. But going back to those areas, let's go over all the areas in the game. We have the hub, Showdown Town. Here there are a bunch of random NPCs that walk around, and it acts as the central hub. You can do some exploration and some tightrope walking and bank your jiggies. There's even a wanted system here. Yeah, a wanted system in Banjo Kazooie. It's pretty funny though. There's even Jinjos to rescue in the hub who have been wrongfully jailed, but rescuing them gives you more notes. The hub isn't too big, and you'll do a fair amount of exploring with the upgrades when you get the trolley. The first real world in the game is Nutty Acres. This area is massive and reminiscent of an older Banjo game. It's really a huge island where everything's made of machines. It's like all just robotic kind of. It's one of the bigger areas in the game, and it can feel quite empty a majority of the time. But I like the open bits a bit. I like it a bit. It's kind of nice that it's open, there's plenty of time and just area to drive around and explore, not that there's much to see. It makes good use of boats, cars, and planes. The second world is Logbox 720, which is obviously making fun of the Xbox. This level is quite cramped and has many floors to it. It is a much more vertical level and favors flying vehicles. One nice touch is that you're supposed to be inside a game console, and hitting the walls will cause the game to glitch out, or the sound cuts out, or something like that. That's a nice touch. The third world is Banjo Land, which is my favorite level by far. It's huge and open, more so than even Nutty Acres, and favors all vehicle types. There's something for all the types. It features a ton of memorabilia from the previous 2 games, so there's tons of references, and a few characters actually come back from old games. Really, it is just a nostalgia pull, and they know it, and it works. It's my favorite level. I love seeing all the old stuff come back. I like the funny references, and I like how a bunch of the remixes are here from the stuff from the old games. It's a nice level. It's a good world. The fourth world is the Jigoseum, which is a huge coliseum. It favors cars and planes and not really boats. It's generally empty and there's really not much to the area at all. It's just a coliseum and you get various coliseum tasks such as racing, knocking down dominoes, or feats of strength. There's really not much to this. The fifth world is the Terrium of Terror. I think I said that right. This world is very cramped and is a bunch of like balls in space put together. It has sections for each vehicle type, but is very cramped and gives off this weird Space Force vibe. This level is just weird and not in a good way. It's very condensed and small. Now the last level is Spiral Mountain. Yeah, the end of the game is actually just Spiral Mountain. It's a lot bigger to account for because of the vehicles, and it's the same Spiral Mountain you know and love. And yeah, it's like one of my favorite worlds. So yeah, there's only actually 6 worlds in the game, but minus Spiral Mountain, there's 5, and you go back to them a number of times in these acts where you are given new missions. So you will be frequently revisiting these worlds over and over. Just because you finish the first act, even the second act of a level, doesn't mean you're done. You're probably going to go back at least 2 or 3 more times. But those are the worlds. I went over them in decent detail. I guess the next thing to mention in the game would be the enemies. There really are none. It's just these like robots that try to damage your vehicle and get in the way. They're more annoying than anything else and die with relative ease, so there's not much to it. And there's really no bosses in the game either. You fight Grunty a number of times, like I mentioned, but these just do not feel like boss fights. They just feel like more missions. The only thing that feels like a boss is when Mr. Patch comes back from Banjo Kazooie and you have to shoot him with grenade eggs again. That was actually pretty sick. But that's it for bosses, air quotes. I guess the last thing to mention would be that at one point there was online for the game. You could battle online and race and stuff like that, but I can assure you nobody's playing this game online. I can just tell you that. I remember I even tried playing online when Rare Replay came out, and there was nobody playing then. This is a dead feature. But that's the gameplay for Nuts and Bolts. It's different from the previous game in a lot of ways, introducing a lot of new mechanics with varying degrees of success, and I'll save my bitching for one nice long segment. Anyway, let's move on to the graphics. I don't like the graphics. Plain and simple, I don't like the graphics. Do they look good? Yeah, for the most part, but I mean, I just don't like it or the art direction. Let's just start with the elephant in the room, the character models. They all look just bad. They all look awful, except Grunty. They all have this weird block design. I just don't think it looks good. I'd rather see smooth character models, not these block things. What is this, Gumby? Like, look at Banjo's nose. It's just a block. Kazooie is eyeliner for some reason. Like, do we need that much indication she's a girl? Come on, what is this? I think the duo look terrible, and this is the worst they've ever looked. Other characters in this game don't fare much better. I don't like Log with his pong-ass face. I don't like how Mumbo just has pink skin now. Humba, she looks fine. They had to change her because that last design was just questionable. Klungo just looks freaking terrible, and the less said about Boggy and King Jingling and Jolly, the better. Bottles looks okay, I guess, but he's just too blocky. The only good character design, I think, is Grunty. She has good design and is just not too blocky. It's easily the best design in the whole game, and the only one I think they got right. But as a whole, the character models, they just look terrible, and they animate pretty well, actually. I will say the animation is pretty well done. There was nothing really choppy or stiff. It was all fluid and decent. That was good. It's too bad they didn't look good, like the models. The lighting and textures in general, I thought were actually really well done for 2008. I think everything looks very nice, and there's a good amount of detail to everything. The water in this game looks great, and some of the best looking water you'll find on the 360. Lighting is also really well done. I remember the lighting in Viva Pinata was just as good, and this game really continues that trend. And the shadows look nice. The lush wildlife, all good here. And even some of the more industrial areas, I think it looks pretty good. In addition to this, the frame rate was fantastic. It was rock solid. I never had any issues with it. It was great. I wish I could love the presentation with this game, because it's actually really well done when it comes to everything except those character models. Those ruin everything, in my opinion. Everything looks great besides them. But, I mean, why focus on anything else? That's the issue. The graphics are a mixed bag, though, because of those character models and the general art style. The sound was surprisingly disappointing. The sound effects are pretty much all new for the most part, and nothing really stands out. Everything sounds pretty stock, basic, and really uninspired. Everything sounds metallic, industrial, and I just didn't get any sense of sound, and was just kind of disappointed. The sound effects really just don't stand out, in all honesty. Maybe I was expecting too much, but didn't get anything from those sound effects. The characters don't have voices again, but they make the noises like the old games, and these are fine. They get a pass from me. I quite like them in the old games, and I like them here. I think it's all good when it comes to the character noises. What's honestly disappointing more than anything else in this game is the music. The music is again done by Grant Kirkhope, but sadly it's just totally forgettable. Nothing stands out anywhere near as much as the previous two games, and even on its own I just think it's not very good. It's not all bad, don't get me wrong, it's just the majority of the music lacks any charm, it's not catchy, and it just failed to stick with me as a whole. There's a few good tracks in there, don't get me wrong, but a majority of it just really failed to stick with me outside the game. A majority of it was actually just incredibly generic. It felt really generic. Maybe one or two tracks didn't feel all that generic, but yeah, no. Majority generic. I will say that all the remixes that are in Banjo Land, pretty good, like I mentioned. One of the reasons it's the best level. That's the best music, by far. And those are the best tracks in the game, actually, by far. And that's pretty sad that the remixes of the old tracks are the best music in the game, as opposed to anything new. Yeah, no. So, sadly, the music, quite disappointing. In fact, the sound itself, quite disappointing. It wasn't bad, it was just forgettable, generic, and just average. But okay, I've talked about the presentation, the sound, but it's time for the real bitching.
So what isn't so good with this game? Where do I even begin? Where do I even begin with this one? Let's just start somewhere.
So I guess the first thing to mention is, yes, it is nothing like the other Banjo games. And while that is not inherently a bad thing, and I'm not going to slam the game for being different, I'm going to slam the game for a variety of other reasons. Just know that the game being totally different isn't really an issue to me. While I don't like that the game is totally different from the previous two games, I'm willing to accept that. However, this game has some serious issues with it, and these issues are not at all related because of the previous two games. There's no relation there. These issues come completely on its own. First off, let me attack the structure of this game. I think the structure of this game is just not fun at all. The entire concept of going to these worlds, doing these missions, I think is just boring and leads to burnout very quickly. It feels exactly the same every single time. You just go into this world, then immediately go to whoever's giving the mission, do their mission, leave, go to the next world and do the exact same thing. Repeat this literally in every single area in the entire game. And while this wouldn't be such a bad thing if the missions were all really varied and different, that's just not the case at all. That's where the real repetition comes in. This game is really repetitive and gets really repetitive quickly. See, almost every mission is basically you're either racing, you're either moving something, or you're defending something against enemies. Occasionally there is that admission where you do something that is not one of those three, but I'd say probably around 90% of the missions revolve around those three. You notice it immediately as they just have you moving stuff from point A to B or just doing boring races, then occasionally defending something. It just gets really boring really fast. The racing in this game is just not engaging at all. It's not fast, it's not fun, it can be rather frustrating, and almost all the levels suffer from the same issue of just not being structured for a race in them. A lot of them are too cramped for races, leading to this very claustrophobic feeling for a majority of them. The missions where you're moving somewhere from point A to B gets repetitive quickly because you're literally just moving something from point A to B. It doesn't ever get much more exciting than that. I found it was easiest to just make a really good vehicle that could move stuff efficiently, and I stuck to this vehicle literally the entire game. Even the last mission, I used the same vehicle to move stuff. I just made a super vehicle basically. It's not fun in the slightest, and I thought it was rather dull. I have no idea why the game was so insistent on you moving stuff from point A to B, whether it's watermelons, people, or even jiggies. I just didn't like it. The last mission type where you defend, I really don't have much to comment on because I think these are actually not terrible. You end up just destroying a bunch of grunty robots, and there's just not enough missions like this in the game to where I felt bored and thought it got repetitive. A lot of the missions in the game give you a vehicle to use for the mission, like I mentioned earlier, and these missions are easily the worst missions in the game. A lot of the vehicles they give you are just shit, pure and simple. They're just garbage. They're slow, heavy, not fun to use, and are really gimmicky. I didn't have fun with these for the most part. Other missions that don't fall into those three categories usually give you a vehicle, and I think pretty much all of these are terrible. Some of them have confusing mission objectives and are just almost trying to be unintuitive, it seems. Some of them just feel really poorly designed as well, and they just needed more playtesting. Speaking of playtesting, I think they should have playtested the beginning of the game some more. I thought the beginning of the game was a bit overwhelming and unintuitive. I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing. I was just barely scraping by with the vehicle they had. I wasn't really sure on how to make one that well, and I really wasn't sure on what makes a good vehicle. The game tries to have some tutorials, but I just don't think they're the best. I think they should have gone more in depth with what actually makes a good vehicle and what you need for certain types of vehicles. Obviously, I got the hang of things eventually. I was able to beat the game, but at first I thought it was a bit overwhelming and unintuitive. So besides that and the missions feeling really repetitive very quickly and being just a drag, what else don't I like about the game? Well, I have a couple more issues. First off, I think the levels in the game suck, if I haven't made that clear. I don't really like any of them except Banjo Land and Spiral Mountain. Showdown Town is just generally uninteresting, and I think it's a shitty hub. I don't like all the people walking around. It's pretty annoying. I think the platforming with the trolley is bad, and I just didn't have fun going around it, to be honest. It wasn't the worst hub, but I'm not a fan of it. Nutty Acres is just too big with nothing to see. There's nothing interesting here. Feels like a bunch of empty space. Logbox 720 is just too cramped for its own good, and you constantly find yourself getting stuck on stuff while it acts like that it somehow favors cars. This stage does not favor cars at all. It favors helicopters, and that's it. Banjoland, don't really got any issues with that one. It's my favorite level in the game. It is a bit big, but doesn't feel as empty as Nutty Acres. The Gigosium simultaneously feels big, empty, and small at the same time. There's nothing really in it at all, so it feels big and empty, but then the moment you do a race, you realize how small it actually is. I just think it's boring more than anything else, and they don't utilize the space properly. The Terrarium, I think, is just awful, actually. This is easily my most hated level in the entire, franchise. It's so cramped, it is so squished together, it can be confusing to navigate, and it's just not fun at all. I found myself getting lost, getting stuck on more shit than even in Logbox. I almost hated every single mission in this world. I thought they were just all bad. But by this point of the game, my patience was really being tested, and I was really sick of all these repetitive missions that just have... and this level has some of the most annoying ones in the whole game. Spiral Mountain, unfortunately, you're only here for like an hour, but it's good. It's a classic. Real classic. So yeah, I don't really like any of the levels minus Banjo Land. That really does not help the game from testing my patience and being sleep-inducing. It really does not help the levels either, and makes them even more boring due to me not liking the areas. In fact, I'll be completely honest, I had more fun in Nuts and Bolts, going around on foot collecting notes, whether it was in the overworld, in these other worlds. I had more fun just walking around collecting notes. It reminded me of the good old games, and it was not as boring as these missions, and even though they had basically no moves, I had more fun controlling Banjo on foot than these vehicles. In fact, I'll be completely honest, I just had more fun collecting notes in general than doing any of these missions at all. I just wish there was more incentive to explore on foot than the notes, because I just had way more fun than these annoying missions. But now we get to my absolute biggest issue with the game. The issue that ruins the game, in my opinion, makes the game frustrating, boring, all those negatives I mentioned for the missions. My biggest issue with the game is the physics. The physics in this game are terrible. I think it's safe to say these are some of the worst physics I've ever seen in a video game. They're just beyond jank and frequently prevented me from having any fun with this game. The physics rear their ugly head in basically every single mission in the game. The physics make this game from just kind of an average to maybe under average game, but it is a bit boring, to just a bad game. I think the physics are just that awful. Let me go into some detail. They are really janky and feel unpolished as all hell. They affect the controls for a majority of these vehicles as well. A majority of these vehicles just feel generally unresponsive. A lot of them feel really slow and sluggish because of this unresponsiveness as well. They are wildly inconsistent, never abiding by one set of rules. And then my biggest problem with the physics, getting stuck on shit. I guess there's also kind of that kind of is less physics and more hit detection, but I'm just gonna pair them together because your vehicle gets stuck on everything in this game. Now, we all have serious pet peeves in video games. Some people despise backtracking. Some people can't get into stories in video games. Some people hate anime in video games. Well, you know what my pet peeve is? It's getting in cars and vehicles and getting generally stuck on everything. Whether it's that shitty Alone in the Dark game I looked at last year or GTA, nothing pisses me off more than your vehicle getting stuck on the environment and you having to restart. I absolutely despise this in video games, and this video game is full of it. I frequently found myself getting very frustrated because my car just gets stuck on shit so badly that I just have to restart. And it happens all the damn time. It happens in like every mission. The races I frequently found that one tiny part of my car will just scratch a wall the wrong way and my entire car just spins out of control, gets completely stuck, and I'm just unable to move. I have to like back up slowly, try to maneuver the car. Your car is like a magnet to getting stuck on shit. It frequently tries to get stuck on the environment. It's only worse in levels like Logbox, where it's so easy to get stuck on actually every piece of the environment. Don't even think about touching the other vehicles you're racing during these races. You will get completely stuck on them, and it'll just be to the point where there's just no way you can win the race at all. You just get completely stuck on them, and you have to fight the physics and collision detection. There are times where you swear you don't even touch the other vehicles, but lo and behold, you did, and now you're stuck on them and you gotta restart the mission. In missions where you have to move something from point A to B, don't be surprised if the game just is unresponsive with you when it comes to moving the objects. Whether they get stuck on your vehicle, they get stuck under your vehicle, or just on the environment in general, I frequently encountered issues just moving stuff. Now, I'm not asking for perfect physics, even great physics, just decently consistent physics. One thing that really makes the physics that bad is the fact that you're under a time limit or racing in every single mission. So all the time, you're just getting shit stuck on your car, in the car, whatever it is, wherever it is, being really sluggish for no discernible reason. It's really frustrating. It's really annoying because you're under a strict time limit and you're trying to do shit as fast as possible, and your car is busy playing let's get stuck on every piece of the fucking environment, and the item you're transporting won't even get off the vehicle when you're trying to move in. Oh, I hated it. I just hated it. Being under pressure with the time limit in combination to being so unresponsive just led to frustration immediately. I'm not going to say I'm good. I'm not even going to say I'm decent at this game, but I know a lot of the time my issue was not me. The issue was the car getting stuck on everything. It just pissed me off so bad to see my really good run in a mission be completely squandered within less than 10 seconds because my car just accidentally bumped the wall the wrong way and it turned it around and ruined everything. It was the issue that just made me dread a majority of the missions in this game. It caused me to just not have any fun with the game. I was just pissed off a majority of the time. Like I was playing the game and I just wanted it to end, and that's one of the worst feelings for any game. I hate most of the levels because of the amount of stuff I got stuck on constantly. The missions are repetitive and borderline boring. A lot of them you can just use the same vehicle for everything. You don't even actually have to get creative with this game like the game wants you to. Like I said earlier, I made one super vehicle and I did pretty much everything with it the entire game. Like basically everything. At the end of the game, they actually want you to make a super vehicle because you get tasked with a bunch of different things to do, and I just hated this game. It's not because it's totally different from the previous two games. I just think the game has some serious issues on its own with terrible physics, bad mission design, and overall repetitiveness, which led to me wishing I was playing any other game with the word banjo in it, even Banjo Pilot. I just don't really see anything with this game at all. I honestly have this opinion that most people who like the game or really like the game are probably just trying to be mega hipsters, because I don't see very many positives with this game at all. I don't like the story, I don't like the characters, I don't like the character models, I don't like the world, I don't like the structure of the game, I don't like the missions, the physics, most of the music, and I especially don't like how every mission is time-based. Like, if every mission was not time-based, I could probably put up with the janky, bad physics, but every mission's time-based. I don't like that at all. I don't really see what there is to the game, like, at all. I mean, minus the models, it has some pretty good graphics, a decent vehicle creator, and roaming around the levels on foot, just collecting notes can be kind of fun, but that's it. I just didn't find very much good with the game, and I honestly just don't think it even deserves the word banjo in it. Like, straight up. Like, really, I don't think it deserves the name Banjo in it. I think this game is nowhere near as good as the other Banjo games. If it didn't have the word Banjo in it, I would never play a game like this at all. It's just not my type of game. I don't often hate a game but I really hated this game. It's really a black stain on the entire franchise in my opinion, and I wish it didn't exist. I'd rather have nothing, in all honesty, and I genuinely mean that. I would rather have nothing than this game. That's how much I hated the game. Usually I'm not a hater, but this game really is the exception.
There you have it. Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, I think, is a terrible game on many aspects. Not just because it's different, but I think it's a terrible game in its own right. There's a reason it's the most controversial Banjo game, and just considered one of the most disappointing games ever. I really just have to get this bad taste out of my mouth. I just did not like this game at all. And I honestly think the last good game Rare made was probably Viva Pinata, which, you know what, I think I'm gonna go play Viva Pinata actually. It's on Rare Replay as well, and it's a far better game, so I'm gonna go play Viva Pinata. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you made it to this part of the video, thank you very much. Much love. If you could maybe like or dislike or sub or comment, anything would be great. Much love. Thank you very much for making it this far. I appreciate it. It makes me feel nice that somebody watched the video. If you made it to this part of the video, let's have like a secret code word, right? Bricks in the comments. I don't know. Something funny. But thank you very much. Anyway, have a nice day, everyone.